What will be the future of Imran Khan, who has already begun preparing for elections? Also, what hope do the opposition parties have now? And most importantly, is Pakistan ready for a fresh round of elections, given its economic health at the moment? We'll try and find answers to some of these questions and more on the show today with an eminent panel of experts who are joining me on the program. So let me first introduce them to you. I have with me three distinguished panelists joining me virtually. Mr. T.C. Raghavan, former High Commissioner of India to Pakistan, Lieutenant General retired Syed Atta Hasnain, he's a defense expert, and also Professor Swaran Singh, he's chairperson, Center for International Politics, Organization and Disarmament, Jawaharlal Nehru University. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining me on Sansad TV for this edition of Perspective. Professor, how do you look at the situation, especially in the manner in which Imran Khan was able to dodge the no-confidence vote against him? Do you think it was a clever ploy on his part that could pay off in the longer run for him, for his future? He's already begun preparing for elections. He's called a parliamentary board meeting on Tuesday.
Thank you, Tina, for having me on your show. I think the political and constitutional crisis, the way they are unfolding, I can to some extent understand Imran Khan underwriting the narrative, but it has to be in consonance with the General Bajwa and the military in general, because that is where the real power lies. What is very clearly definite, even if in a very remote case you could have a situation of National Assembly being revived, that Imran Khan definitely has to go, and it establishes a very unpleasant reality of Pakistan having never seen a prime minister completing a full term. And that history continues to be maintained, whatever comes out of these crises.
Yes.
Second, for the first time, there was a possibility of democracy sort of strengthening itself and removing a prime minister in the due process, which is the democratic process, which again has been lost. Obviously, it's not likely to happen that a formal no confidence motion will be passed, and that is how one prime minister will be replaced by another. So some of these limitations of what is often called a Praetorian democracy, which is where military is in control of the system, that showcases that there is, more it changes, the less it sort of changes in that sense. Not much is changing on the ground in Pakistan, except, of course, it is also true that if you have to look at a leader who's perhaps least kind of demolished by the history of Pakistan. So far, it will be, of course, Prime Minister Imran Khan. And in that sense, he's trying to find for himself some kind of a niche to come back. Pakistan has seen prime ministers coming back again many times. So he's looking at a possibility of him becoming, not just being seen as a stooge and a puppet of military, but, in that case, going out fighting and then finding a narrative for himself in case he has to go and contest elections again, which could open possibilities of, Imran Khan coming back again. Though we understand that over a period of time, there have been instances where he's kind of stood at variance, if not confronted the military's decision and the army chief's decision. And there have been instances wherever prime ministers have crossed red lines, Bhutto or Nawaz Sharif or now Imran Khan, in terms of undermining the authority of or centrality of armed forces. They have been kicked out of office very often. In Bhutto's case, he was sent to gallows. I mean, you remember the equation between General Ziaul Haq and Bhutto in that sense. So in that sense, Pakistan is more or less repeating some of that history, in which case I think we might see this kind of uncertainty staying on for some more longer period of time. Now, what kind of caretaker prime minister comes in place now, that is something which is again most interesting, because that will tell us what is unfolding immediately in these constitutional and political crises, how much impactful that kind of caretaker government will be, because the greatest crisis for Pakistan today is economic crisis. The rupee is kind of falling.
Professor, despite falling out with the army, differences with the army, Imran Khan has maintained a very, very confident, posture. At least what we've seen in the last 2 days, sort of cornered the opposition, taken them by surprise. Now, whatever the Supreme Court rules is another thing. We'll all have to wait and watch for more clarity on how things unfold in Pakistan. But what, according to you, are the factors which are giving Imran Khan the confidence? What is it that he sees as an advantage for himself, so much so that he even called for fresh elections?
Indeed, when it became almost absolutely clear to Imran Khan that he is not likely to stay in office, he thought the best opportunity for him was to call for general elections, which, of course, the fact that President Arif Alvi accepted immediately and announced that looks a bit interesting, because last 6 to 8 months, reports are saying that President and General Bajwa were actually in communication with the opposition parties. And one insinuation is that, it is not just United States, but domestically also, the so-called deep state was perhaps engaged with opposition parties coming together the way they did. But now when opposition parties have kind of stood together and almost threatened the president to be impeached, he's now talking of selecting the caretaker prime minister in consultation with opposition parties. So in that sense, obviously the clout that an outgoing prime minister would have had perhaps is reduced, but the posturing that you mentioned, the confidence that Imran Khan is at least showcasing, is clearly aimed at his electioneering. It's already in that mode of thinking of next general elections and how he's going to be contesting those national elections again. And that is posturing fundamentally, whereas I think every politician in Pakistan clearly understands that a certain positive equation or synergy, I would say, with the armed forces is very critical. We also need to underline that in November, I think, again, we are going to see Bajwa's term is coming, General Bajwa's term is coming to an end. There was talk about General Hamid maybe, taking that position. So not just within armed forces, there could be certain contestations, but I think army and politicians' equations would also be dependent on, whether General Bajwa stays beyond November or he's being replaced by another general. So in that kind of uncertainty, I think this confidence the showcasing is a strategy for Imran Khan to look at next elections, because apparently he doesn't see, other than possibly Shehbaz Sharif, any other serious contender to him in general elections, provided his equations can come back to normal. We understand that General Bajwa's speech recently at Islamabad, the security dialogue, was at complete variance with what Imran Khan has been saying. He went all the way out to kind of placate United States by saying that half of Ukraine is destroyed, and he called out aggression of Russia, saying it can't be condoned. Which again, actually, interestingly, was happening when Shah Mahmood Qureshi, the foreign minister, was negotiating rollover of the kind of payments of debt to China, the 4.5 billion, which ultimately happened. So that kind of posting by General Bajwa again was to ensure that there's not too much damage of this constant campaign, that the shrill campaign that Prime Minister was doing of blaming United States, particularly Assistant Secretary for South Asia and Central Asia, Donald Lu, naming names. I mean, that is really insinuating too harshly. So I assume that at this stage, the question that you asked me of the confidence of Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif, who we can almost see outgoing Prime Minister, is based on fundamentally two things. One, he's looking at showcasing that positive synergy with the military to the electorate. So he's complimenting the Pakistanis, saying, National Assembly has taken great decision in terms of Deputy Speaker Qasim Suri taking the decision of dismissing the no confidence motion resolution. At the same time, I think he is also aware of the fact that he apparently, among whatever great politicians now exist in Pakistan, he possibly could be a choice that perhaps becomes acceptable to army and awam in that sense, both. And since there is several examples of prime ministers having come back repeatedly, I think that imagination of him coming back again as prime minister is something that possibly is supporting his smile.
Absolutely. And I think